Today we'll be doing some painting basics. I've primed grey, a first generation Plague from the Mantic Dead Zone box. It's made of Restic, which is a plastic resin mix. It goes together reasonably well. I would, if I'd thought about it, have filled these pieces in with green stuff, but I'm just using this model to show the basics of painting. I've got a fairly standard, this is probably in normal measurement, a 2 or 3 brush. Get it a little wet, bring it to a point. But what I'll be doing is I'll be applying some base coats. So on the bony parts I'll be painting it with a base coat of Zandri Dust. On the flesh parts I'll be painting it with a base coat of Mephiston Red. So we'll be starting with the Mephiston Red. I'll be using a bit of water in the palette to thin the paint down. Give the paint a good shake to mix the pigment up. And you can see that it flows a little more smoothly once the water's added in. This will hopefully be enough to do all the flesh parts. So we'll start picking out the flesh parts in the miniature. If we look quite closely, what I'm doing is I'm doing all the bits that aren't a bony formation basically. And I'm doing this just to show the basics of painting. So this is just getting some base coats down. Once we block these out, it'll be the vast majority of the model, because I'll only be doing it in 2 different shades, red and bone. So that's that bit done. Let's get down in these bits. Where it looks quite ligament-like. So this is quite a large model, and again I've deliberately picked a large model so that you can see the details. Paint these indents. Because we can do them as sort of soft tissue. So as you can see, a bit of colour and the model does start coming together. So the feet. But most of this armour, most of this model is the bone bits. You can choose to go in and pick out a fair few. It's a nice solid colour, it's gone over well. It's gone over quite well on the grey as well. So what I do to speed up drying is very often I'll put this reasonably close to a light. I'll be quite careful because it's a Restic model. That could do with a bit more red there. But what I'll want to do is have it dry and then hit it with a second coat. So I'll move the paint palette well away from the light, put the model quite close, and I'll be back in a few minutes when it's completely dry to apply the second coat. With the first coat dry, I'm going to go in and apply a second coat. When you watch Warhammer TV and you hear Duncan talking about 2 thin coats, this is exactly the sort of thing he means, because what happens is you get a much better colour from 2 thin coats. So when this dries, it'll be a much more vibrant red, instead of slightly washed out in pink, which is what it's dried like after the first coat. So I'll be hitting it with further coats anyway, so it wouldn't necessarily be much to worry about, but it's always nice to get a good strong base coat that is close to the sort of colour that you want. Quite quickly, because we know exactly where we're painting this time, we can pick out the second coat. So I will be back in a minute, once this is dry, to show you the result of 2 thin coats. That's the second thin coat dried. You can see that the red's got darker, less chalky, and has got more depth to it. You also can't make out any brush strokes. So the next thing I'm going to do is shake this Zandri dust. I've already put some water in the palette, but I'm going to put a good bit of this paint in because it is going to cover most of the model. But mix up to a nice thin mixture, and then it's going to cover most of the model, so I don't need to worry about being too precise. And you can see how quickly a bit of thinned paint and a large brush will start to cover a model. There's lots of nooks and crannies that I've got to make sure I get into with this base coat, because while I will be hitting it with an ink wash after, I want a nice solid colour throughout, and you can see how quickly the model starts to take shape. This is 2 quite light base colours, so they should take ink quite well. And if you're thinking, I'm not liking this, it's looking very light, what you're doing, wait until the ink hits it. Because that will bring all the definition back up that's been lost through painting solid blocks of colour. So you will get some models that are very much a large pale shade. I think particularly if you're painting undead, which means doing skeleton warriors who are mostly bone. And at some point I will paint some skeleton warriors, and I will go through how I do bone, because I do go a bit OCD with skeleton warriors. However, this I am trying to keep good and simple, and more of the model is getting covered. I will, however, go and repoint the bristles of the brush before we go into making sure the fine detail gets done and doing the face. That's a reasonable base coat. I'll give that a couple of minutes to dry, and then I'll come back and I'll hit it with a second coat, this time of Rakarth Flesh, which is about half a shade lighter than Zandri dust. And after that I'll be doing the inks. The first base coat for the bone is now dried. I'm now going to put in a second base coat, this time of Rakarth Flesh. I've already put some water in the palette, so I'm going to take a couple of drops of paint and mix that in. Again, nice thin paint consistency, about the consistency of milk. So I'm actually going to do what's called a wet brush. So a couple of brushes on the tissue, and then a pass over the bone. So you can see already the bone's getting lighter, but the recesses are still the original dark colour. I've not taken as much paint off the brush as I would with a dry brush, but I've still taken a reasonable amount. And you can see the difference it's making in terms of colour already. Quick brush down on the face, then on either side, making sure to get all the armoured ridges that define the exoskeleton of the model. Back of the fingers, and because the flesh is mostly recessed, I can be a bit less careful than I normally would be. Going over the bone areas. Yeah, the butt of the model is reasonably problematic because there's a bunch of flesh and a bunch of bone. Same with the crotch and the sort of bone six-pack that we've got going on here. But as you can see, apart from a couple of little bits of red that'll need touching up, there is not a lot that needs doing. Making sure I get all of it. I will have to neaten up so now almost done. A couple of the flesh parts need a bit of neatening up, but the model is already looking better for the application of a wet brush. I'll be back in a minute now that we've done these base coats. I've now gone over the model, base coat and a wet brush on the bone, and simply blocked it out with the red. There'll be some red bits that I'll need to touch up, but first of all what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to ink shading and shade all the bone and then all the flesh, and then start detailing and picking things out and layering things up. I'll do that in the inking video.